um, bad attention. So getting in trouble, sometimes that still feeds that behavior purpose that they were trying to serve.
Yeah, a lot
Um,
of times with attention, kids don't, it doesn't, there's not a differentiation with attention, whether it's positive or negative attention, whether an adult is angry at them and talking to them like they're in trouble or is giving them praise. They're still getting the adult to talk to them, and that was the goal.
yeah.
The last one is tangibles, which just means like maybe that's a certain thing that they want, whether it's they want to play with an iPad, they want something specific for lunch. If they're having a meltdown about what's on their lunch tray, maybe it's they wanted something specific for lunch. It's what they wanted. An item or a thing that they wanted instead of what they're having to do. If a kid wants grapes instead of apples and they got apples, that could be something that they then get upset about because they just wanted grapes.
So our success story this week. So I'm just going to read it for you really quickly. So with a particular student, I formed a relationship that was based on having fun, being gentle, and being the adult in the classroom that was considered the soft one. I tried not to raise my voice and to always speak calmly to the child. I feel like this was helpful in many situations, but in one in particular, I felt that it was extremely helpful. This child ran out the front door and was heading towards the street. I ran after the child and yelled, one of the only times I had done so, to this child, "Stop." The child stopped, and I think it was because the child was so surprised to hear me yell that they understood that it was a serious situation.
So what we really loved about this success story and situation was that this adult, they only were raising their voice in a situation of danger, of physical danger, to get that child's attention. And because this adult did not frequently raise their voice at the child wasn't desensitized to that adult raising their voice. And so it was effective in the situation whenever it was appropriate.
And when it needed to be affected. When they needed their attention really fast, they were able to get it because they didn't raise their voice all of the time, every time they spoke to them.
It's like that with us too. Like if you have someone in your life that constantly raises their voice or yells, you kind of start to like, and you don't listen and you kind of start to shut down. And so it can be the same way with the kids. Whenever we're constantly raising our voice, it doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah. Or like if you have someone in your life that is constantly making like little snarky remarks, like it might hurt your feelings the first few times and it might continue to hurt your feelings a little bit, but you're just like, oh, that's just them, they say rude things. Whereas like if you have someone that says something to you once, you think, oh man, I must have upset them, or something's wrong there, whereas you wouldn't with the other person. But I think that another reason why we kind of were drawn to this story for this week is because since we are talking about conscious discipline, there are a lot of misconceptions about conscious discipline and what it is and what it looks like. And so whenever at the beginning of the story, when this person is talking about how they were trying to be the fun, gentle, and the adult in the classroom that was kind of the soft one, a lot of times people think that's what conscious discipline is. And it's not necessarily true. I think when we were talking about it earlier, we were talking about like with Coach, where he always has such a good relationship with the kids and he'll direct them and they listen to him, not because he's like not degrading and yelling at them, but that kind of talk, but because that they want to do what he wants them to do and they want to respect him, and they respect what he's saying, and he's able to redirect kids really quickly. But I wouldn't necessarily consider him like the soft one, and he uses a lot of like conscious discipline techniques without really knowing that he's using conscious discipline techniques, I think. So it's just like one of those kind of misconceptions. And so we wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit at first.
So the like first thing and main thing with conscious discipline is that it is addressing the adult first and the child second. So the one of the main things in that is that you really need to know your own triggers and your natural responses and behaviors so that you can make a conscious effort to change the words that you use, the tone of voice that you use, and your actions, so then you can have better and more productive interactions with kids. And it's not that you're going to treat certain kids differently than other kids. You're not with conscious discipline. It's not, okay, this is what I'm going to do with this kid that I know is a trauma kid, but I'm going to do something else with everyone else. Conscious discipline is that you're changing your behavior so that you interact with all children this way.
It's also about it's not about babying anyone or about it's about being conscious of the words that you're using and the tone of your voice. So it's not about saying, oh well, you don't have to do that, that's okay, you don't want to do it, so you don't have to do it. It's not that type of babying people, and it's not just for children, small children and toddlers. You can use this all the way up through high school. So I think that's another misconception that there is about it. It's just about bringing awareness to how you're disciplining a child, not how you're disciplining a child, but not abstaining from discipline. So it's about how you do it. It's not saying don't do it.
I think that's like probably one of the biggest misconceptions with conscious discipline is that people think then children don't have to face consequences or don't have to obey or listen to adults. And that is not it at all. It's just being a little bit more creative and not necessarily the kid realizing that they are doing what you want them to do.
I like to think of it too as like it's throwing back some of that discipline onto the kid and like ownership, I guess, so that, and it kind of like in the way you're talking about, it kind of tricks them into thinking that they made that decision to do the right thing in a lot of the ways, but also just like treating the kids more like they're a human with brains that can do like make their own decisions. And whereas like a lot of times as adults we just think, you're a kid, so you should do everything I tell you to do exactly how I tell you to do it. It's just treating them a little bit more like we would want to be treated, kind of like we talked about last week, I think.
And one of the main things is it's just focused on, it's telling, being conscious and telling students what you're wanting them to do instead of telling them what you don't want them to do. So I think a lot of times our natural tendency is to say what we don't want from somebody, but we're not saying what we do want. And that's where a lot of confusion comes in, especially with kids. But really, when you think about these concepts, not just with children, but in areas of your own life, that's what I normally do in relationships, in friendships, with family, at work. When I kind of bring this into those situations, I realize, oh, it's the very same thing. If your boss or someone at work is just telling you, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. I don't like the spreadsheet the way that you did it. Okay, well now what? What am I supposed to do on that spreadsheet? What are you wanting from that spreadsheet? That's the information that you really need. So it's the same thing with kids. Saying, thank you for walking in the hallway with your hands to your side, instead of saying something like, stop doing that. Stop touching your friend. That's telling them what you don't want them to do, but it's not telling them what you do want. So saying, thank you for walking in the hallway with your hands by your side is telling them that you not only want them to walk, but you want them to do it with their hands by their side.
Just kind of bouncing off what Lindsay said about like hearing from your boss in that way, or hearing from someone else like that they want you to do something. It's kind of like when you do something and you get an email or a correspondence that says you're not supposed to do that, but no one ever told you not to do it. Like they have to be explicit and say, well, all you had to do was tell me to not do it, and I wouldn't do it. So just like making sure that you're just clear with them about, and so that they know, hey, I'm supposed to walk in the hallway and I'm supposed to have my hands down by my side, and not just telling them don't do it, which is what she said. But it's about having more positive experiences than negative. So more positive interactions with the kids than you have negative interactions with those kids, because it's going to build trust and safety where they feel safe with you, and personal responsibility where they can take ownership of that stuff between children and adults.
One of the questions we got from you guys on the Google form you filled out was really just about academic goals for kids with trauma, and kind of what the expectation should be with those kids. And one big thing we want to stress is that it's really like about differentiation. So it's not that they don't have to do something, it's just that they may need to do it in a different way, or it may take a little longer. You should still expect for your kids with trauma to do their homework, to do their assignments, things like that. But it's understanding that, okay, this is a kid with trauma who does not have, we've sent home a homework assignment and they don't have an adult at home to help them. They won't be able to get the supplies for this project. So it's thinking about those things and realizing, okay, we may need to go about them completing this assignment in a different way. They may need extra support and guidance. They may need the supplies to complete the project. So it's just thinking beyond it a little bit, but still expecting them to do their work, but being understanding that they may need a little bit more support and kind of effort. But they're still going to be just as capable as every other kid, and we still want you to push them to be their best, because when someone doesn't expect anything of you, it a lot of times makes you have a little bit of less self-worth, that you don't think people think you're capable. And we definitely do want to instill in our kiddos that we do think that they're capable of doing these things. We just have to figure out what's the best fit for them to get that task done.
We definitely don't want to take our trauma kids and instill that learned helplessness in them, because we don't let them take any ownership or responsibility for their goals in life, academic or socially or any otherwise. But also, like, keep in mind too that some of these kids, when we have our trauma kids, these are probably the kids that are going to have some other struggles, like especially mental health wise. So these may be our kids that are diagnosed with anxiety or and some other mental health diagnosis. But if that's the case, they also may be our 504 kids, which are already going to be receiving some differentiation with how they do things. So they might get like that extra time on tests or that kind of stuff. But like, just like with our 504 kids, even if they're not on a 504, we do expect the trauma kids to still have their goals and hang in there just like any of our other kids would. So it's about choices. And I love this. And it was so funny because we made this and then this slide, and then I went to eat my lunch today. And then I started reading on Facebook, and it was just one of those like silly things that waste time. And it was talking about like different stories of things happening. And there was a perfect example of this same exact thing that I had a screenshot it and sent it to Lindsay, where giving someone choices can help so much, because it's not letting them do whatever they want to do. You're giving them two choices of what you want them to do, and then you let them pick from that. So you're not saying, hey, you can have a choice of anywhere at the room you want to sit. You're saying, hey, you have a choice between you can sit at your desk or you can sit at your carpet or at the carpet. And they're both places that you want them to be, but they don't have to know that. So you win either way, but they get to decide where it's at.
And you're saying, just like, would you like to sit at your desk? You're being polite, you're having a calm tone and things like that, but you're giving them a choice of saying yes or saying no. So that is indicating to the child that they have a choice to say no, and they have an option to say no and not sit at their desk. And that's the biggest thing, is that And you can't really get mad at somebody whenever you're saying like, do you want to do this or not? And they say, nope, I don't want to do it, because you did give them that option. So that's a little confusing for them.
So saying, I need you to be seated. Would you like to sit at your desk or would you like to sit on the carpet? So it gives them that direction that they have to be seated, but it puts that choice back on them. So they're still sitting where you want them to. Like the thing that I sent Lindsay that I found on Facebook said that he realized as he got older that his dad would give him choices, because his dad figured out that if he said, you need to go mow the yard, that he would procrastinate and him and Han, he would never go do it. But if he said, would you rather wash the windows or would you rather mow the lawn? Then he would pick one and he would get it over with really quickly. And so it's because he made that choice. So he got to take ownership of that choice. And so then he got it done. Because, go ahead.
And taking ownership does all those things for us, like making us feel more respected, that they gave us an option. It increases the buy-in where you might actually want to do it a little bit, or have some pride because you're like, well, I made the choice to mow the yard, or I made the choice to sit here on the carpet, so I'm not going to have a bad attitude about it, and just really increases that personal responsibility. Yes, a lot of times choice with which activity to do first works from Tabitha, and that's very, very true. If you have 2 assignments you're needing a student to do, you need them to do a math assignment and you need them to do a reading assignment. You can say, would you like to do the math assignment first or the reading assignment first? And then they get to pick, and then you can work on that together.
So you can also use this in like discipline. I put that in quotes because, discipline, we don't, as the teachers and the counselor and the social worker and the IAs, I feel like what we do more is like redirection than discipline, because discipline is more of like a Hutton and
Hinsey, yeah,
thing,
admin.
an admin thing, but so when I say discipline, I don't mean like you're going to serve this consequence as much as like what they do. But we have an example of that. So this is a scenario where a child is grabbing or snatching instead of asking for a turn. So what the adult did is said, Max, you have a choice. You can say, may I have a turn, when you want an item your friend has, and continue working in your small group, or you can grab it again and you'll work alone in this chair for the rest of the day so both you and your friends are safe. Max, tell me what will happen if you grab from your friends again so I know you understand. So by asking him to repeat that, she knows that he repeats the consequence to her, and the adult can check for clarity. So the adult knows that, okay, he understands that if he does it again, he's going to be in this chair alone for the rest of the day working. So then as soon as the adult turns her back, Max grabs again. So the adult says, Max, I can see by your actions that you've chosen to sit at this table and work alone. So pick up your papers and move to the table. So of course, Max, being a kiddo, does what they do and says, I won't do it again, I promise. He grabbed it first. I was just getting it back. Give me one more chance, please. I'll be good. And the adult says, you seem disappointed. You were hoping you could stay with your friends and work together, but you will have another chance tomorrow. Breathe with me. You're safe. Pick up your papers. You can handle this. So I really liked that example.
And one thing I love about that too is that obviously even you may encounter where a kid then is upset that they're having to face a consequence. So this adult is immediately saying that you have another chance tomorrow. We can have a fresh start. This is not indefinite. Especially for kids, long-term consequences are not good. Making a kid sit in a corner for a week of the room is not going to be good, because they feel like it goes back to that escape. They feel like they don't have an escape from that situation. So they're going to feel really trapped. upset, that's too long. Time concepts for kids, as we know, is a lot different. And so a week could feel like eternity for a kid. So long-term consequences aren't great. So it's saying this is short term, you've got another chance tomorrow. The adult is immediately saying, breathe with me. So they're going to immediately go into doing a coping skill to help that student regulate, to not become as angry, and to calm their body and their mind. Reassures the student that they are safe. And then again, gives them direction on what they need them to do first, what the first action they need them to do is, which is picking up their papers, and then gives them some reassurance and a little bit of encouragement that the child is capable of handling this situation. So a lot in that short little sentence.
And by reassuring them you can handle this, that's what's going to build resiliency, which is what our trauma kids need more than anything, because resiliency is what's going to dig our trauma kids out of their hole of trauma, I guess. And so by reassuring them that they can handle it, it builds that self-efficacy, and it really builds that resiliency and tells them so that next time this happens and they have to go and they have to pick up their papers and go to a different table by themselves, they know, well, I've done this before, I can handle this again. And that's kind of what it's all about. So sorry. Okay. So this is just kind of about language. So what language you would want to use with those kids. So there's a language of control, which is kind of, it's like that language that we're talking about, where it's like, we want you to do this and we want you to do it now, versus that language of safety, which creates that environment where they know that they're safe. And so they just want to do it to be, to keep everything safe.
So that kind of that they're losing it, that language of control is would be saying, you're driving me crazy, I've had it with you, turn your red card, one more outburst and you will leave my room. Which I'm going to tie that again back to the escaping. When a kid's having a meltdown and they're wanting to escape, having to do that work assignment, having to be in that room or that classroom, they're trying to escape the classroom and get out of having to do that. So by then saying, if you keep up this behavior, I'm going to send you out of the room and to the office.
Then what do you think they're going to do? If my goal is to get out of that room and you tell me I can get out of it by having an outburst,
I'm gonna melt down in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's one of the reasons that having like a calm down space and utilizing a lot of this in the classroom is so important. So instead, you would want to be redirecting that kid. So in this case, like I think most people have heard of the STAR with conscious discipline. And so the language of safety would be that doing the active STAR calming, where I'm going to take a few deep breaths and calm myself down, then I will speak to you. So what this adult is also doing is that they're modeling behavior, which is super important. The kids look up to us even when we don't realize it, and admire a lot of us. So when we model behavior, and especially healthy behavior, that is going to go further than you sitting there and like trying to drive something into them. So modeling for yourself, I'm feeling a little frustrated, so I'm going to take some deep breaths and then you and I will talk. And that's teaching that child that healthy way of communication and calming themselves.
Yeah, and just like you were saying, I think it's totally fine to express that to the kid, because then it models it. Like, this situation to me it's making me feel very frustrated, so I'm going to take some deep breaths, and letting them know like you're frustrated with that situation, because they're feelings that everyone's going to have to deal with the rest of their life. So I think it's better if they see it modeled and people are open and honest about that's what's going on. Like, I'm kind of frustrated with our situation right now, so I'm going to take a few deep breaths and then I'll be ready to speak to you. Because I mean, how healthy is that for when they grow up to be able to do that with their friends and their relationships and everything. So This is also for judging. So that judging language of, I don't know how such a lovely girl can be so lazy, to kind of changing that into like, instead of you're judging them, you're noticing them. So she's having a hard time getting started with her work. Um, or JJ is just mean. He bullies everyone in class. I have done everything except suspend him and nothing works. To obviously, JJ doesn't know the words to use when he finds himself in a conflict. So we might need to work on those social skills of maybe instead of just getting on to him, we need to teach him how to be friends with people, because he might not know. He obviously is having some trouble with that.
And then there's that language of fear with walking feet, walking feet, walking feet. And you're saying, what did I just tell you? You know, because they continue to not use their walking feet. That language of safety would be walk to the classroom just like this. And then you would model. If you want their hands by their side or you want them to have their bubble, you would model walk in the classroom just like this. And then you're telling them why, so that everyone is safe. When like crossing a road, hold my hand. Do you want a car to hit you? That's a language of fear. But a language of safety would be hold my hand so that you're safe when we cross the street. Or pushing in your chairs, because that's something we ask kids to do a lot. The language of fear saying that would be, what is our rule about pushing in chairs? But that language of safety is going to be push your chair in so everyone is safe. Because yeah, why do we push our chairs in? It's to keep people safe so people don't trip and fall.
I think part of it, and that's a really good example, is just teaching kids that there's a reason to the things that we want them to do. Because if they understand why, it's just like me. If I understand why I've got to do something a certain way, even if I don't like it, I'm going to be a lot more willing to do it because I know why. Because I can say, well, it sucks, but I get it. But so it's the same thing with kids. Like, they just think that we want to be uptight and make them push their chairs in. But if we explain to them that it keeps everyone safe because people won't trip over their chairs, then it makes a whole lot more sense to them on why they're having to do that. And that language of everyone is safe, keeping you safe, I find a lot with the kids that if I explain to them what you're doing right now is not safe, that they understand that more than they do just like, stop leaning back in your chair. Instead, like, when you lean back in your chair, it's not safe for you because you might hit your head and get hurt. And just kind of explaining it that way.
That also shows that you care about them and their safety whenever you're saying, I don't want you to get hurt, and that this is why this isn't a safe action. That shows that you care about them too. So it goes back to that relationship building that we were talking about last week.
Yeah. And I think what's cool about that is that we all do care, right? So all it is putting your actual motivations out for them to see, so that they understand that the reason why you want them to do it is that you care. Because when they hear you just say, stop leaning back in your chair, like, they don't know that that's what you want. They may just think that you don't like it when they lean back in their chair. Or maybe they think you're worried that they're going to break the chair, but you're not really worried about that. You're worried that they're going to be safe. So I think that I think it's cool because it's not saying anything you don't mean. It's saying what you do mean, which is always, I think, better.
And I love this part a lot, I have to be honest. So the giving commands is, you want to obviously give a lot of choices, but there are times whenever it is completely appropriate to be giving commands. And this is going to happen. There are times when, yes, you just need kids to do what you need them to do. So there's a lot of different types of commands that we want to kind of go over with you guys. So giving like a very direct command, a lot of times, and I am very guilty of this too, especially with like my nieces and stuff, is I'll say, let's clean up the books, or let's do this, because we think, oh, we're being very, like, we're using a good tone, we're being nice, we're saying we're going to do this together. But what you're implying is that you're going to do that with them, when in actuality, you are wanting them to clean up the books. You're not wanting to be the person to clean up the books. So when you're saying, let's clean up the books, you're implying it's a group activity. And how much of the books are they then supposed to clean up? Can they pick up one book, two books? You do the rest of the books? It can still be very confusing on what your expectation is. So the more like correct and direct command would be, please pick up the books and put them in your desk. You're being very clear on what you're wanting from them and where you want them to go. Positively stated commands is another kind. And so incorrect would be stop running. This is it's telling them that you don't want them to run, but again, it's not telling them what they should be doing. So they should stop running, but should they skip? Should they crawl? Should they,
And they will call you on that.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it before, you will see it because they will call you on that.
And so a more correct would be saying that you need them to use their walking feet. And again, if it's a smaller kid, a fifth grader, if you say use your walking feet, they've probably been explained what that means before. But if they're continuing to not use their walking feet, then you may say, I need you to walk like this. And again, demonstrate what it is how exactly you're wanting them to walk. But those younger grades, it's always good to model that behavior. So another example would be, don't touch that. Don't touch your friend. A better, more constructive and positively stated command would be, please put your hand in your pockets. Again, you're telling them what you do want them to do. And you're going to get the desired effect because they're not going to be touching whatever it is you don't want them to be touching because they can't when their hands are in their pockets.
Just some specific commands. So incorrect, if a child's standing on a chair, would be stop, be careful. But correct would be, please put your feet on the floor or please stand on the floor. So it's just telling them, like she said, it's just telling them exactly what you need from them. And you could even say like, I need your feet to be on the floor because you're not being safe right now. Or please stand on the floor because what you're doing is not safe. And using that same safe language to kind of explain why. Polite and respectful commands, just like you would want to be told, right? So it just models and teaches children to be polite. So starting commands with please and using a calm, even tone of voice. If you model that you're always going to yell by raising your voice, then the child learns that they should also yell. And if you always give your commands in a yelling voice, then the child learns that they don't have to listen to you until you yell. So when you start to ask them nicely, they're like, meh, she'll escalate and then I'll do it. She
doesn't really mean it till she gets mad, is red in the face and is screaming. Yeah.
So you desensitize them when you do that all the time. So just kind of not yelling every time you give them a command. Because also it goes back to that example that we gave in the beginning, that whenever you yell every time you give a command, then that means that they're going to hear them all the same. And it sounds like every command is just as important. But if you're telling them to pick up the books and put them in their desk, yes, that might be important, but it's not as important as if they're going to run out into the road and get run over. So you want them to listen to those times when you need to be able to have that voice reserved for when you really need it because it's an emergency and it's not safe.
Miss Kilpatrick, do you mind if I tell a little story about you?
Go for it. Oh, no.
So, Miss Kilpatrick is always using nice, cheery tone of voice, very calm. She rarely raises her voice. And the one time I heard her raise her voice, we were on the phone. She was at bus student.
I know what you're talking about.
And we were on the phone talking about some things. And I heard her give some directions to students on what she was needing them to do and how she was needing them to sit while they were waiting. And they continued to not listen. And so eventually she did have to use that point when they started being unsafe. And there was a risk for
because they were hitting each other.
Yeah. So she did have to get to a point where she did raise her voice, and she raised her voice, but she was not yelling. And she said, ladies, I need you to do this and this right now. And they immediately stopped. And even Katie said, she was like, the look on their face and all the look on all the kids around their face was like, wow, you just made Miss Kilpatrick raise her voice. So she really meant it. And that's because she doesn't do it often. And that's the only time I've even heard you do it.
I think part of it too, and I'm sure that you guys understand where I'm coming from on this, is it helps. We want those relationships with kids, and we want that connection with them. So how do we balance having to guide them and also keep a good relationship with them, especially coming from my perspective as the counselor? If I create that environment that I'm going to get onto them for all the things that they come and tell me, whether they're going to be in trouble when they come see me, then no one's going to come tell me anything. So I have to be really careful about how often that I do any sort of like commanding and misdirecting, and or not misdirecting, redirecting, and how I do it, how I say it, because it could completely break all the rapport that I have. Because unfortunately, a lot of the times the kids that are trauma kids that are maybe needing direction are also the ones that probably need to come see me. So I have to be careful how I balance all of that. And I'm sure you guys completely understand that, because no one wants to be like the mean person in the school. But then we also have to do our jobs, and we have to have them do what we want them to. So I really like this because it kind of gives me that way of how I can communicate with them and tell them what I need from them, but not be like the mean person, I guess.
Yeah, discipline does not make you mean. It's really about how you go about disciplining that kind of shapes people's perspective of you. So you can absolutely discipline and still hold kids accountable, and while you maintain a good relationship, and they still think you're nice. I promise.
Sometimes it happens in the same conversation, and I think, you must hate me right now. And then they come up and they're like, I love you. And I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, like you are more upset with like having to discipline them than they are, because they're not as upset. We're more upset by it than they are.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any questions? I think we've gone on we didn't want to run out of time again like we did last week, so we've kind of tried to pack a lot in. But do we have any questions right now before we go forward, or anything that anybody wants to share or say?
I know we're like info dumping you on this time. So if you feel like you want to see this again, I am recording it. There's a couple of people that couldn't be here today, so I'm going to send it to them. So if you want to see it, let us know, and I'm happy to send it to you as well to watch again. We're not done yet, but just, are there any questions right now?
Y'all are very quiet today. You can chat, box, or speak up, either one.
It feels like it this week though. Like it feels like a week where I kind of want to be quiet, if that makes sense. So like, I get it. Okay, we'll keep going. And if you think of anything at the end, I think we'll have a couple extra minutes. And so, we do have a chat.
Oh.
Nope, you're good, Jana.
Lots of you multitasking. I think I saw Miss Todd and Jan up there too, having to multitask. No, it's not easy. So another reason it's good, we recorded and you guys can watch it back too.
Yes. Oh, this is the one we just did. I almost started reading this one again.
We gotta go to the next one.
So just some effective interactions. So showing you're pleased with good behavior by praising them. Praise them to death. Praise the child for the specific behavior you're pleased with. So thank you for walking down the hall with your hands by your side while staying in line. And it's the same thing we talked about last week, where I think, we were kind of joking that you tell one kid that they have a great bubble in their mouth, and all of a sudden every kid has a bubble in their mouth. So it's a similar thing. So if I hear someone praising, yeah, exactly. If I hear someone praising Miss Lindsay for walking down the hall with her hands down her side and staying in line, I want that praise too. So I'm gonna do it too and see if they'll praise me for it.
We all love praise. Everybody likes getting a compliment. Everybody likes that positive feedback. So it's just like that with kids too.
Mm-hmm.
Showing that you're listening by reflecting. I know that like when I first was in school and learning about reflecting, I was like, oh my gosh, this seems so hard. I feel like you have to,
Mm-hmm.
like, it just seems overwhelming when you first start. But then once you start doing it, you realize it's actually one of the easiest techniques that you can use to let someone know that you're listening and you're paying attention to them. I mean, if a kid says, look, this crown's red, simple as, yes, the crown is red. You are literally just repeating what they said. Obviously, you can get like a little more complex than that if it's a more complex situation. Somebody says a big long sentence, you could just reflect back a few things that you heard them say. But reflecting is huge, huge, huge. And one of the main reasons that people a lot of times get upset is because they don't feel like they're being listened to or they're being heard. We're all like that. I know that's one of the reasons I get upset if I don't feel like I'm being listened to. So it's the same way with kids, and doing that reflecting back technique can be a huge way to let kids know, I notice you and I am listening and paying attention to you.
And it's also a great trick if you're like me and you can be a little like ADHD a little bit for yourself to make yourself listen. So if you're repeating back to them the things that they're saying, then you're also hearing what they're saying. Not just so that they know you're hearing, but also you're actually hearing, and then that helps to build that connection. So like I know that there's times where there's kids that pull you aside and they want to tell you this big long story and it's exhausting. And so just like repeating some back to them every now and then will help you to stay engaged as well.
Yeah, like, oh, that they're telling you this big long story about their weekend. You can just reflect back something like, oh, so you guys went to a soccer game this weekend. That's really cool. That showed them that you were listening.
Showing you're interested by imitating. So playing with the same toys as a child in the same way or doing the same action. So the child is bouncing a ball, so you also bounce a ball. Or like in my office, a lot of times we'll do Play-Doh where we sit down and we play Play-Doh together, and we'll build stuff together, or like maybe we'll all use the same like cutters, like cookie cutter type things, or that kind of thing to make a similar thing. Or I've done it before where we sit down with the same like building blocks and we build something together. So kind of doing that, but also engaging with each other at the same time.
Yeah, imitating is huge. It goes so far with kids. It goes far with adults too, in our everyday interactions. But it can be your body language. If they have a really like relaxed body language, you could kind of have a relaxed body language too. Things like that, just to let them know like we're connected. They notice me. All those same things. Another very easy thing to do to have a positive interaction with a kid, and all these, I should have started with that, is all of these are things that, especially if you're trying to relationship build with a kid, are great tools to relationship build with those kids. The quiet kids who you can't figure out how to have like a conversation, you can't get them to open up, they won't really tell you a lot. All of these are things that you can do without them really having to speak very much. Some of them, they don't have to speak at all, especially with describing. So these are all great techniques you can use to build relationships. So with describing, you're just saying out loud and verbalizing what you see a child doing, so that then they know that you're paying attention to them. So one way you can do this with behavior would be you're showing respect to your friends by reading your book quietly to yourself and letting them concentrate on their work. So you're praising them, you're kind of building some of those social skills by telling them that they're showing respect, and this is how they're showing respect. There's a lot going on in this, that you're literally just describing what they're doing, but it's helping. With kids, whenever they're like doing an art project or something like that, it's also kind of easy to, even if a kid's just like coloring, or they're playing a game or something like that, you could say, oh, I noticed that you put red in, you colored this red. you're literally just saying that they colored something red, but it helps them know that you're paying attention to them.
Mhm. I do that a lot. If you've been in there, in any of my classes where the kids color, I'll walk around and I'll say, "Oh, I love how you colored that person pink," or whatever. Even because I always let them color however they want to. So, even if it's just like they take one crayon and they scribble, or I'll go around and I'll say with kindergarten, I'll point and say, "Hey, what color is that right there?" And then they'll say, "Oh, brown." And I'll say, "You're right, that is brown. Great job." Just like engaging them while they're doing their own activities so that they know, hey, like I'm walking around looking at your pictures. And it also keeps them more focused because they want to color something cool because they want to hear me say, "Hey, I love how you did that rainbow hair," or something like that, because they always want to do rainbow hair. But anyways, um, but it just keeps them a little bit more engaged too. So the great thing I think about all of this is that not only does it help you, or not only does it help them and your relationship with them, but it also just helps you out, because if they're doing the right thing because they trust in you, or because they made the choice out of the two right things you gave them an option to do, then they're doing what you want them to do. So you're, scotch free. So it takes a little bit of work getting to that point, but then once you're at that point, you have that groundwork paved to where they want to go do the right thing because they're going to choose to do the right thing, or because they're going to be more engaged because they want to see you praise them, and that kind of thing. So it helps you out in the long run. It's short-term work for long-term rewards.
Absolutely. And again, these are all things that we as adults, we want too. So just remembering these are things I want and I need at my job and in my relationships. It's the same thing for kids.
Yep.
And then we come to the power of ignoring. And this is huge, huge, huge. So ignoring is very
It sounds really ironic after we come from paying attention to kids and now we're going straight into ignoring. But I promise there's a point.
Yes. So ignoring is going to be used for those negative behaviors. So everything else was those were more of like the positive behaviors and trying to focus on the positives. This is whenever that child is starting to do those negative behaviors that we're not wanting to see. And so a lot of times, again, back to those four foundations of behavior is attention. A lot of times kids misbehave because they want attention. And so when you ignore a student, you are not giving them what they want. They're wanting attention in a negative way, and then you're not giving them that they're wanting. So whenever you give attention to a behavior, you're rewarding them and giving them what they want. So whenever you're doing those things that we've talked about, a child is doing what you want them to do and you're giving them attention, you're giving them what they're wanting, which is great. But also whenever kids are not doing what they're supposed to do and you're giving them attention, you're still giving them what they want. So you're giving the child that's doing what they're supposed to do what they want, and the kid that's not doing what they're supposed to do what they want.
And you have to think of it like this: if I can do what you want me to do and get attention, or I can do what I want to do and get attention, what am I going to do?
What I want to do.
Probably what I want to do, because I'm going to get the same thing from what I'm looking for either way.
Yes.
So I'm going to do Katie at that point.
So ignoring is going to be appropriate for those like more minor things, like they're tapping a pencil, you gave them a command and they
those kids, or that will sit there at their desk for 15 minutes after that, after you give them the command they don't want, and go over and over again.
Or giving like a verbal insult, like that's dumb, that's stupid, or sometimes more profane things come out of their mouths, but still all the same you want to ignore. Our natural instinct, and a lot of the way probably a lot of us were raised, was that you respect adults and they won't tolerate that, and so you got on to. But this is a different setting, this is a different situation, it's different, and we've learned a little bit from them, and from since then. And so because that's how we were disciplined, a lot of us, that's how we naturally want to say, oh, I need to do something in this situation. I need to correct this behavior. But in reality, the better way to correct the behavior, is to ignore the behavior instead of engaging in it. So those minor things that it really, is it a big deal if they're doing it? Probably not. You can just ignore. But it's not appropriate when the child is being physically aggressive, like hitting someone. You don't want to just ignore that. That is a point that you do have to intervene.
And that's kind of, it all comes down to like the safety. Is what they're doing safe? So like if they're tapping a pencil on the desk, it's annoying, but is it safe? Yes. But if they're hitting someone else, it is annoying, but it's also not safe. So it kind of comes down to that, what is safe. So if the child is yelling and talking out in a loud voice, you ignore the behavior. And then whenever the child calms down and talks in his calm voice, you can praise him for saying thank you by saying thank you for talking in a calm voice. And that teaches them that they can get your attention in the future by staying calm. So if your attention is what they're wanting, it teaches them, hey, I'm going to get it by staying calm and doing the right thing instead of by yelling and talking in a loud voice. Because if I do that, I'm going to be ignored.
Yeah, the wilder I get, the more attention I get. That's what I'm going to do. Versus if you get no attention from being wild and acting out, and you do get attention whenever you're doing the right thing, you're going to make the choice to do the right thing.
So that kind of goes back to that short-term work, long-term rewards type thing, because when you're first getting them to do this and to act this way, there may be like a little bit of a time frame where they'll yell and talk in a loud voice and you've got to just buckle down and ignore it. But then it's going to teach them long-term that same thing, that they can talk in a calm voice and get attention, but they're not going to get it for yelling and talking in a loud voice.
If a child is thrown themselves on the floor, kicking their feet, you should just remain calm, remain neutral, ignore them, remove any objects that they could hurt themselves on, like a chair. Just don't engage verbally, ignore it, continue what you're doing. And this is going to teach that child how to self-soothe, come out of it, but they're not going to get attention from that. And if you ignore the behavior, again, you're modeling in the class for all the other children that are in the class to also ignore the child's behavior. And once the child realizes that they're not going to get attention from that, they're usually going to stop.
So you see this a lot in, there's just certain classes where you'll see it, but I know I've seen it in kindergarten where I'll read them a book and there'll be one kid that doesn't want to sit down at the carpet or doesn't want to do what they're doing, and they're walking around making all kinds of noise, stomping around at the back. But the kids are so used to it, they don't care. They just keep doing what they're doing and they don't even turn their head. And it's amazing that they can do that, but they do. And so the kids are resilient. You think, I don't want to let a kid sit there and tap their pencil or sigh really big or say hateful things to me, because that's going to disrupt the whole class. But the kids are going to follow your lead. It's the same concept as when you have a toddler and they fall down, and before they start crying, they look to you first, because they're looking to you to see if you're gonna, how you react. Because if you react and you're like, oh, you're okay, let's keep going, they're a lot less likely to start crying because they fell. But if you look at them and you're like, oh, are you okay? Are you okay? They're gonna start crying because they're feeding off of you. And it's the same thing that the kids in the class are doing as well, is they're going to look to you to see how they should react. And if you're not reacting, they're not going to react either, at least after the first or second time.
And an example of this, again, would be for us adults, would be if you're upset about something and you are in a group situation and you go somewhere and are talking to other adults and you're griping and you're saying da 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 da, and maybe you're doing or saying things you shouldn't be doing, but everybody around you is like, oh yeah, or oh my goodness, what happened, da 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 da. If they're engaging it with you, even if you're saying and doing something you shouldn't be doing, if they're engaging with you, you continue to do it because you're getting that reassurance and attention. However, if you go and you're talking and you're griping about something and nobody says anything, what do
Or
you
they're
do?
like, oh yeah, I know she's having a tough time. I know like her grandpa just died or something. Then you're not gonna keep talking about her because then you're not gonna get any like positive attention for doing that.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I am not getting the desired effect of attention, and I'm going to stop doing this and not do it anymore. So it's the same thing.
I think sometimes I forget that kids are just uh, adults that haven't fully formed yet. So
They're
um,
tiny humans.
we're the same species, which sounds really funny to say, but like a lot of the same things and motivations that I have, kids have the same ones. And so um I've just figured out how to deal with it now, and they haven't. So we have to teach them how to deal with it, because we know how to deal with it now. So it's only fair that we kind of share that with them, right?
And we all learn through trial and error and experimenting to get what we wanted, and that's just what they're doing. So we're just helping shape that. And we are at 2:01.
Yep. Are there any questions? That was our last slide for today. I know we just like threw a bunch of stuff at you, but I hope it's good stuff. This is some of my favorite stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed it like we do. We're kind of nerds for this stuff, so I don't know that you'll enjoy it as much as we do, but
We were really excited about this week's materials. Okay, well,
if we did find out that you are able to count this as PD hours. So anybody that wants to count it towards PD hours, you can count that. Ms. Hutton did approve that.
I just don't want to happen.
Me too, guys. All right. Well, we are gonna be here for our well, let me tell you what we're kind of thinking really quickly. We're going to have next week's as scheduled, and it's supposed to be our last one. We are considering just having an optional sign on the next Thursday where you can come on and you can ask us any questions you might have, or we can fill in any holes that we might have left, because we're realizing it's a ton of information still that we could still give you. So we're considering having that. So just keep in mind that there will be that. But I think since we already kind of told you it's 4, we'll make it optional for whoever wants to come. But it would still be, you would still get paid for it. So it would just be up to you.
yeah, it'll still be paid in PD time.
Yes.
And fun time where we get to talk a little bit more and we're not talking at you so much, because
Yes.
we like to have it be more conversational.
And we thought we might go through some of those survey answers as we've gotten more on that time as well, that we're not going to be able to get to next week. So, all right. Well, thank you guys. And if you ever want to see this again, just let me know and I'll send you the recording. And we'll see you next week.
I saw that, Tyler. That was cute.
Ladies,
Thank you.
That was one of the best double hand waves I've ever done.
I enjoy it.
Glad somebody got to witness it.
Oh, and we recorded it so we can play it back.
Because it's still recording.
It's so cute.